Despite more than 3 months of economically damaging lockdowns, the coronavirus pandemic seems to be getting worse. China and Japan had declared victory over the disease, but are now reporting fresh spikes in cases. Meanwhile, other countries are still scrambling to get their outbreaks under control.
We are not out of the woods yet. It's very important. We're making these cautious, calibrated steps. We're opening as much of hospitality as we can on July the 4th, opening as much of the economy as we can. Some things, alas, still remain, closed until they can become COVID secure.
It's to you, to the people of Texas, we're with you, and we're going to stay with you. We're going to make sure that Texas and your healthcare system in Texas have the resources, have the supplies, have the personnel to meet this moment.
More than 10 million people have contracted the disease that's believed to have originated in the central Chinese city of Wuhan. More than 500,000 people have died. That's according to data from Johns Hopkins University. The economic impact has also been dire. The IMF expects global GDP to shrink by close to 5% this year, the steepest decline since the Great Depression. The total cost over 2 years could be as high as $12 trillion. And there could be more misery to come. India's second most populous state, Maharashtra, has extended its lockdown to the end of July. That's a day after the nation reported 19,000 new cases, its biggest daily increase. In Brazil, there's growing anger over the government's inaction. 1 in every 10 COVID-19 deaths takes place in the South American country. It's also the only nation other than the US with more than 1 million cases.
Marginalized groups in Brazil are at risk under Bolsonaro's government. Bolsonaro's government puts our lives at risk as much as COVID-19 does, so we have to stop him.
There is hope for struggling nations as researchers get closer to a vaccine. Human trials are being conducted on every continent, and China is even using one on members of its military. Once immunizations are approved for commercial use, scientists say the challenge will be ensuring everyone gets it. Paolo Montecillo, TRT World.
Well, for more, let's go to Christian Lindmeier from the World Health Organization in Geneva. Welcome back to the program, Christian. Now, as we approach the 6-month anniversary of the pandemic, which will be on Tuesday, we've reached a grim milestone, haven't we? More than 500,000 deaths worldwide and more than 10 million infections. How would you describe the progress that's been made over the last 6 months? Are you happy with what's happened?
I don't think any one of us can be happy with this scenario. 10 million cases, 500,000 deaths is a grim milestone, as you just pointed out. If you look at the monthly increases, it's going faster and faster, and the daily increases in general are going up globally, even if individual countries are doing pretty well. But let's not forget, when we talked about months ago about the strong measures countries have to take in one way or the other, we talked about flattening the curve, about getting the curve below a certain threshold so that the health systems can cope with the influx of patients. It wasn't said at that time, or we never thought that we could just turn off a faucet and it's over and done with. So this is a marathon we're dealing with here. And the steps forward are not too bad. Many countries who are even now having flare-ups, but in their health systems, they know how to deal with it. They have hospitals available, they have tests available, they have tracing capacity, and that is important, that we find and trace every single case that is infected, and we can find the contacts of these people. And that will determine how well we can move on. If a country is able to do this, then the lockdown measures or the strong measures of the society may not have to be as strong overall. It may have to be only a certain town, an area, a county, whatever, but way less than a whole country. Because when you know exactly where the virus is in your country, then you can fight it right there instead of having to put a cover blanket all over the country.
Yes, you mentioned flattening the curve, and that's been the key aim of basically every government around the world. And it looked like the US was making some progress towards that for a moment in time, but things seem to be spiraling out of control at the moment, particularly in states like Florida, Texas and Arizona, where we're seeing record surges in infections. What needs to happen in the US right now, which, as we know, is the world's epicenter when it comes to the pandemic?
Any country which has a surge right now, and the Americas in general are doing not pretty good there. They mark for half of all the cases in total, with the positive exception of Canada. So every country which is in a similar scenario needs to first really lock down on the virus. Instead of locking down the people, lock down on the virus. Find it where it is, trace it, test the people, isolate the patients, and find the contacts. That is of utmost importance. Because now, as people have been starting mix again, holiday season coming up, whether it's in country, out of country, schools have opened up again, economy needs to revive, and markets need to open, whether it's the little markets, I mean the vegetable and grocery markets, or whether it's the big economical markets. Everything needs to happen again and is happening again. And we have to do this with caution. We have to do this with the distancing measures. We have to do this with an understanding of the virus. And this is where the interaction of the politics with their people is so important, to explain what is going on out there so that people can react, can be cautious, and can go about their daily livelihoods as normal as possible, and yet remain cautious and not infect each other again and again, or transmit a disease or catch a disease and bring it into the family. So it's this interaction between the society and their politics and their politicians and their governments, which is so of utmost importance.
Okay, now the World Health Organization has just announced that it'll be sending a team to China sometime next week. What does it hope to achieve there?
So we don't have the details on this yet and the setup of the team and the exact mission, but the whole goal when this then will happen is to look into the origin of the virus, to understand the origin of the virus better. That can be done in many, many ways, but we really want to find out whether the origin of that virus is from a certain animal into the market, so that a dead animal or a live animal was brought into the market, or whether a person was infected outside of the market and brought the disease inside the market. That's just one of the few peculiarities. So the exact transmission route is important to understand future risks of transmissions and future risks to have the virus reintroduced in other areas once it might be a bit more contained in globally. So this is, again, one of the biggest goals, to find out how exactly this started and where it started.
Now, can I ask you about progress that's being made towards a vaccine? We know there are dozens around the world that are being developed at the moment. As we heard in the story there, China apparently is already testing one on members of its military. What progress is being made on that front, and what's looking the most promising right now?
So we have a good handful of vaccines now in a second and third stage of the trials. The vaccine has to go through various trials. First, of course, in the laboratory, then normally in animals, and then in the next trial, in the next phase, it goes to humans. And normally, you only want to test the vaccine on humans when you have a medicine, a treatment against the vaccine, because that means that if somebody catches the vaccine despite having catches the disease despite having the test vaccine, then you can treat them. But in the accelerated process and with the consent of people involved, there are precautions to be taken, and it can yet be taken forward and tested. So this is one of the next steps of testing, and of course, any vaccine which proves positive in this will be a good candidate then to be broadened out and to be used in the wider range. There are more steps to come, of course. So this is not, even if this tested now very successful in the weeks to come, then we still won't have a mass vaccination anytime before mid-end next year. So with all the good news that we have now that this is moving ahead, let's be cautious. We need to learn to live with the virus. We cannot hope for the golden wand just yet.